It's really an honor of mine to be here this morning, speaking on what I consider very important topics. I hope everyone had a good weekend, and I hope to entertain you as well as educate you this morning. The title of my talk is Walk a Mile in My Shaky Shoes: How Healthcare Professionals Can Tap into the Ability in Disability. The outline of my talk this morning is as follows. First, I'll go through a description of my life, describing challenges and successes I have encountered. While I'm doing this, a slideshow of photos will be coming across the screen. While I touch on most of them, I won't be directly speaking on each photo, but they should be self-explanatory. From there, I'm going to go into some suggestions through examples on how healthcare professionals can better help those with disabilities. And then we'll sum things up with conclusions and get to some questions. So I know it's early on a Monday morning, but if you're all ready, I invite you to come along and walk a mile in my shaky shoes. On a fall afternoon in 1985, in my hometown of Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, my parents were overwhelmed to find out their baby boy had spastic cerebral palsy. They were given a lot of unknowns. The doctor said I may never drive a car or may never drive a bicycle. Imagine hearing that about your child. Many of you, I'm sure, have experienced heartbreak or received news like that. But if you haven't, I invite you to put yourself in my parents' shoes. How would you feel? Fortunately, I had parents who did not give up or their power to make a difference. Parents who took a diagnosis as a best guess, not a guaranteed prediction. Soon after my diagnosis, I started aggressive physio and finished 93 sessions by my 5th birthday. I also did speech therapy and occupational therapy. I'd sometimes watch the other kids playing sports like hockey, while I broke out in a sweat just trying to catch a ball that would gently toss to me. This was hard for me by times. School also posed problems. I couldn't do any handwriting because of my limited fine motor skills and had to use a computer, teaching assistants, and my dedicated mom in the evenings. Computers back then were very expensive, and the size and weight of a microwave. But we made it work. A few charities in our community kicked in, and we were able to buy a computer for my classroom and for my home. Luckily, I was able to grasp concepts quite quickly academically. I owe a huge gratitude to my mom. She was the hands that wrote my homework for nearly 13 years, every evening and weekend, after she worked a full day of work. She was the chauffeur to physio, and she helped me dress long after the other kids were doing it on their own. She was the one who believed in me when others may have given up. I'm fortunate to have one of the best moms out there. Maybe you'll meet her one day. The biggest challenge for me was dealing with the other kids at school. As you may expect, they bully me, mock me, even by times physically abuse me. How would you feel if you were laughed at, taunted, even punched for just being you? The long school bus ride home was the worst, as the school bus driver could only do so much while trying to keep that big yellow machine between the ditches. But as soon as those big yellow doors opened, I ran to my happy place, the farm. First stop was my giant pumpkin garden to see my 800-pound beauty. The sight of that orange giant peeking through the leaves never failed to put a smile on my face. This was a team effort between Dad and it's where we bonded. Not far beyond my garden, I'd always run into my grandpa, who was hard at work on the farm and had a smile on his face every time. Looking back, he was a real role model, as no matter what challenge the farm threw at him, he never seemed to have a bad day. Today, at age 90, he still cuts some of his own firewood and plants a garden. I plan to be that productive at age 90. How about you? It's his determination and zest for life that has always kept me going through good times and bad. At the end of grade 12, I was proud to be chosen class valedictorian. It seemed like instantly I had gained more respect from the other students than I ever had. I hadn't changed, but they seemed to see me through a different lens, and that changed everything. I went from a history of being isolated by times to being celebrated, from an outcast to top of the class. That's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping others see through an extended lens. How about you? Have you ever treated someone unfairly or judged them, often because they're different than you? Of course you have. We all have. We're human. And then have you had that moment where you realize you were wrong and change your mind? Tolerance, acceptance, and seeing the ability and disability is a learned perspective and behavior. So thank you for being here today, because it means you are the type of person who is open to that type of learning, and that's admirable. Moving off to university was scary, as I no longer had my safe place, the farm, and my safe people, my family. But I was determined to succeed at my physics degree, just like I was guided through my life to work hard at everything. Socially, university students were way more inclusive. They even invited me into their circle of friends. I'll never forget the day Colin, one of my good friends, said to me, "Mac, you should come to the bar with us tonight. The whole crew is coming, and it will be fun if you joined." Finally, I felt included. The university provided a senior student to be a scribe, while I tried to keep up doing some work on my laptop. Roland, the senior physics student assigned to me, could not have been a better fit. Roland was an easygoing guy, and I was a very punctual guy, and got stressed out if I got behind. But he always would say, "Matt, you're almost there. We're gonna get this done," in his calm, quiet voice. A little encouragement goes a long way for anyone, but those who struggle physically, emotionally, and mentally, it makes the difference. After my first year at university, I applied for a summer job at the Michelin tire plant in my hometown of Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. After being called in for a physical with the company doctor, a few weeks later they called me and said, "Well, sorry, we don't have anything you can do safely. Therefore, this summer we can't hire you." I was like, "What? Duh. I've been working on the farm, one of the most dangerous jobs out there, all my life. And you're not going to hire me because of safety? Come on." But not willing to give up, just like I was always taught. My dad and uncle who worked for the company complained to HR. After back and forth, the company was willing to give me a chance. They gave me 2 weeks to reach a production target. I worked super hard and succeeded. And by the end of the summer, I was getting more production and doing it safely than all other 4 students and 3 full-time employees on that post. Determination really does go a long way, doesn't it? After acquiring my degree at Acadia, I was again chosen class valedictorian. I continued my education and did a master's at Dalhousie, studying atmospheric science and oceanography. Socially and academically, I continued to do well and made tons of friends along the way. After 2 years at Dalhousie University, I defended my master's thesis and moved to Toronto to do a PhD at York University in atmospheric science, focusing on wind energy. It was all the conversations with my grandpa around weather and the farm that led me to weather and meteorology as an exact topic for a career. In my final year of completing my PhD, I was contacted by a company in Calgary looking for a meteorologist. They asked me for a resume, and I made sure to include a cover letter outlining my disability, but not dwelling on it. In 2013, I moved across the country even further to Calgary, where I knew very few people, to work for Dynasty Power. While it is true some tasks take me a bit longer, they seem to adjust their expectations. It seems worth it for them, as now I am head meteorologist of their growing company and supervise 2 other junior meteorologists. I go on at least 1 big vacation a year, sometimes 2, since I'm working, and of course, pre-COVID. And usually I do so solo. Not because I find it hard to get a travel buddy, but I enjoy the freedom of traveling solo. If I want to go for a bike ride through the South Island of New Zealand one afternoon, I do. Or if I want to kick back in my Airbnb and take a nap, I also do that. I take great pride in eliminating myths. I like to demonstrate that people with disabilities can be self-reliant while enjoying travel, adventure, and other activities. As was mentioned in my introduction, in the last 10 years, I have really found my freedom vehicle, my bicycle, which I ride 4 seasons of the year. I also work out 2 to 3 times a week at the gym, especially in the winter. Last summer, I biked 5,000 kilometers, and most weekends through the winter, you can find me in the Rockies on my fat bike, just like I was this past weekend. Not only does biking keep me fit, it clears my mind and gives me freedom. Every day I see problems people with disabilities face firsthand. Just like if you buy a yellow Volkswagen, all you see afterwards are yellow cars. But before, there weren't any. When you don't have a disability, many of the day-to-day things we deal with just aren't on your radar. So I advocate. I try to bring understanding and build bridges of understanding. This awareness is super important. I joined the advisory committee on accessibility for the city of Calgary to help normalize disability. Put a ramp here, a braille pad in an elevator, or make sure the snow is cleared on that specific sidewalk. All these are invisible yellow cars for most of you, but for us, they mean the difference between going to work in the morning, going to the library, or being able to shop at a certain store. This past summer, I was doing a wine tour through the Okanagan. At one winery, I asked for a different drinking vessel, as wine glasses are very difficult for me to hold, especially the glass ones. I've actually broken a couple trying to hold them in my hand. That winery quickly rushed to their merchandise rack, picking up a branded coffee mug, washing it, and allowing me to taste their tasty wine. I went to another winery, and that one, with some attitude, said they couldn't help me. They had nothing else in the winery that I could drink from. I left unhappy, even almost in tears. I know they had something else in that winery I could taste wine from. But can you guess which one I'm going to go back to and recommend to my friends? I tell you this story not because I want you to treat me special or feel bad for me. I want you to see the things I deal with just trying to live the life everyone else here does. I want you to see me, Matt, the person of ability who happens to have a disability. And to help with that, I'm going to shortly here go into 3 tips that I think doctors and medical professionals can use in their practice that will also help those with disabilities. I'm going to give examples that I have come across. And there's a picture of my mom, the legend. So as we move into part 2 of the talk, the challenge here is that people with disabilities have extra challenges living in a non-accessible world. Healthcare professionals are experts in medicine and treatment, but they don't have lived experience of disabilities. And up until recently, healthcare was only directed by science. However, I feel strongly that having a patient component in that treatment will greatly benefit everyone. So the first tip I'd like to talk about is relationship with patients. Those with disabilities have complex health issues, or they at least can. They must trust their healthcare professionals so that when tough decisions have to be made, they can look to their doctor for an honest opinion. So forming relationships with those people with disabilities who are your patients is super important. Issues people with disabilities have are often hard to share. But if you have a good relationship, they are willing to share and trust you, and it makes things healthier for everyone. Let me take you back to my childhood. I had an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Leahy, who I saw a few times a year, right from diagnosis up till when I was too old to go to the Children's Hospital, the IWK, back in Nova Scotia. Doctors can be scary, but not Dr. Leahy. He didn't act like a doctor. He acted like my friend. He makes medical checkups and with friendly conversation. He even grew a giant pumpkin one summer and challenged my family doctor to a friendly giant pumpkin competition. Dr. Leahy won. Another time, I took Dr. Leahy a dozen eggs I collected from the farm the day before. And then I proceeded to tell him the names of each chicken that laid each egg. He was quite tickled. At age 8, he recommended I have an operation on my leg, which involved many risks. The tendon transfer would attempt to correct me from dragging my foot like that. I used to trip constantly as a kid. You should have saw my knees. They were ripped to shreds in the summer from running and falling on the farm. My parents were advised to get a second opinion on this operation from the Shriners Hospital in Montreal. They turned out to be totally against the operation and suggested I wear a brace for the rest of my life to correct the problem. They made me one brace up, and it did in fact correct the problem. But it was cumbersome. I couldn't even get it on myself, and we needed to buy 2 pairs of sneakers just so the brace would fit in one. In the end, my parents went with the operation as they trusted the orthopedic surgeon I had grown up seeing. I remember coming out of the OR after the operation, and the 3-foot-high Ninja Turtle I had taken in with me came out of the OR with a cast on his leg as well. Dr. Leahy went over the top, and after the operation, I rarely fell anymore. So without the excellence of this trusted relationship, I sometimes wonder if my life would have been less positive or less independent. Next up, I'd like to talk about pushing the limits. Sometimes people with disabilities are given a pass on how well they can do. Other times, some improvement is considered good enough. But if medical professionals don't push people with disabilities, who will? While it's true people with disabilities can have limits, I believe we need to be pushing them, especially kids, to improve on what they can do. Don't settle for good enough. As I mentioned earlier, I did intensive physio until I was age 5. 93 sessions. I was basically a hospital staff by this point. But then they told me I didn't need to continue. I had improved enough. They told my parents my activity on the farm, and I was already riding a bicycle. That was enough. Was it the right decision? I don't think anyone will ever know. I know very little about medical research, but with a PhD in atmospheric science, I know a few things about proving science, and I think this will be a tough one to prove. But that said, I think we can dig into the issue a bit further. So sure, I was active. Mom could hardly get me in the house in the evenings to go to bed. But very little of my activity was directed. It's kind of like playing hockey. You play a game of hockey with the skills you have, but you learn the skills in practice. I spent 2 years in practice before age 5, and then I was left to play the game. Fast forward 25 years, now in my mid-30s, I have discovered I can still improve with the right guidance. In the past 5 years, I've been working with a personal trainer. And about 2 years ago, I started working with my current trainer, Lance. We've improved significantly. I remember first when I started working for him, with him, sorry, not for him. Uh, he asked me to step up on a box similar to this, but actually lower. I told him he was crazy. I'm like, we should try something different. I don't have the balance to step up on that. He said, we're gonna get up there. So I rested one hand on his shoulder and had a cane or a stick in the other hand. And by golly, I got up there. But it was difficult. We kept working at it over the last 2 years. And I'm gonna show a video here of what things looked like back in early December before the gyms closed. What was this?
Oh! Good.
And there again, just because I'm so proud of it.
Good.
So I've improved so much. And I asked Lance a couple weeks ago, how do you know how far to push? And here's a quote from Lance, my trainer. Obviously, we can't do everything, but the vision is to help you do as much as possible with your current limitations, to help you push past those in a safe manner and improve movement and control. He feels honest communication between us is quintessential to avoiding injury, getting results, and overall enjoying the process. And I couldn't agree more. I love working out, love improving, and I no longer question what I can do. When Lance says, let's try it, I try it. So I often think about how things may have been if I had continued directed training right from a child. Would I have had better balance? Again, I don't know, but it seems like maybe. So this brings me back to the question, do we push those with disabilities enough? And I sometimes think we don't. I remember in gym class back in elementary school, we'd be asked to do something and I wouldn't even try it. And no one would push me to do it. Finally, I'd like to discuss what I call healthcare beyond the stethoscope. People with disabilities often face challenges that medicine and operations can't treat. They require assessments for driver's license, a job, or even a grant from the government to help with rising costs. It's often the doctors that we look for this support. So I think it's important to get support from your medical professionals, which isn't always in the form of medicine. Disability can be often a financial burden. So what you can do to lessen that burden helps improve the life of that individual. Things like the disability tax credit application or other documents. As well, people with disabilities can be socially and physically distanced from their peers. So if you know you have a patient with a disability, maybe try doing some research to find programs they might be interested in. I remember back when I was 14, I got my tractor's license, my farm tractor. Yeah, that's right. I was driving on the roads at 14. But then when I turned 15, there was some question if I could safely drive a car. I had never even considered this, as I thought 16th birthday, I'm gonna hop in that car and squeal my tires out of the driveway. Those around me thought I could drive, but sadly they're not the ones that issue the licenses. So my doctors that have been taking care of me facilitated me going to rehab and get tested for my reflexes and fine motor skills to see if I could safely drive. It was determined I could drive with no limitations, and ever since 16, I have had that independence. In society where we seem to be building, cutting more than building, we need to advocate for these resources and this relationship. If I wouldn't have had those doctors advocating for me and setting up the proper programs for me to get tested, if I would have just showed up without the right paperwork, I'm not sure I would have got my license. Another thing, for example, I mentioned how personal training has helped me so much, but trainers aren't cheap. It would be nice if there was a program that doctors could prescribe and help get funded for people who needed personal training. So as we conclude here, many people see different as bad. If you're not like me, I don't like you. And unfortunately, it's not just kids that think that. They grow up to be leaders, politicians, doctors, lawmakers, and even parents. They don't seem to understand that different can mean another valuable perspective, expanded possibilities, and even more innovation. We may not be equal as in the same. We have many differences, but we all deserve equality. I find myself encountering people who may not bully me directly, but they bully me in the sense that they treat me differently because I have a disability. It's called ableism, discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. Sometimes it's subtle, other times it's not. And I have encountered people who respond to the same statement very differently when I discuss it with them versus a non-disabled person. They may speak slower or louder, but hello, I'm not deaf. They assume that my cognitive abilities are impaired because my speech is. They pity me when they'd be hard pressed to keep up with me. Most of the time, it comes from a good heart and lack of understanding. But ignorance is not an excuse. So again, thank you for being here today to break down the walls of judgment and ignorance by walking a mile in my shaky shoes. I choose to speak up and encourage people to see the ability and disability. The more society can normalize and destigmatize disability, the more society can be inclusive that will help everyone. If 2020 has taught us anything around the globe, whether you are a teacher, doctor, medical professional, or parent, even a person seen or unseen disability, it's time that we choose to see the possibility and impossible, opportunity and adversity, and find the ability in disability. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Matt. Wonderful talk. If there are questions from the audience, please feel free to raise your hand or put your question into the chat directly. There's one question from Adam Curtin in the chat, Matt. Thanks for the great talk. As a scientist with lived experience, have you had opportunities to participate in disabilities research? If not, what do you see as the barriers for those who might be interested?
Well, I haven't had a ton of experience in doing disability research. I actually work in another field, but as I get more interested in this, I will be open to it down the road. I think some barriers are that people with disabilities don't know that maybe the possibility of being included in research is a thing. And as well for others, I think we still have this stigmatization of disability. So there's other people that aren't willing to kind of accept their disability because of the way society works. And therefore they don't want it out there in life and don't go looking for ways that they can improve how things work, and that could be through research or advocacy.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Another question by David Segal. Great talk. How can we eliminate the disability term? I'm not disabled. It's the world that is, in my opinion.
I agree with your point. I think for me, I try to do that with just living my life. I try to create ability and showing people what I can do. And by doing that and showing that I can ride a mountain bike near the Matterhorn, like in this picture, people over time will slowly realize that there's no this in disability. They'll realize that we may just do things in a slightly different manner.
Great. And there's another question from Veronica Kuryanova. Thank you so much. Your advocacy work and you taking the time to talk to the public about your experience is amazing and priceless. Do you know if the things have changed since you were a child regarding early physio access? Do you know if children nowadays get more physio treatment early on?
I don't know exactly, but I do know it's kind of on a case-to-case basis, and I have heard stories where they don't necessarily get their programs they needed. Part of it, I think, is around funding, which again is something I'm not gonna get into. But from my understanding, like it probably happens more in bigger centers. Like say I grew up in Calgary where I was in the being seen at the children's hospital. Maybe they would have recommended I continue. I don't think they didn't stop physio for me because it wasn't available. I think just at that point their knowledge was that it wouldn't help me anymore. And no one's to blame there. So while I know it has improved some, I think there's so much more we can do. Because even myself, no one had ever recommended to me to go back and try to improve through physio or personal training. It's something I accidentally stumbled upon and realized how good my body felt being athletic. And then Lance was able to push me over the top.
Thank you. There's another question, Matt. I would like to get some tips on how to manage stress and build resiliency when you feel stressed out.
For me, it's all about getting away from the things that I get stressed about. So if I have a busy day at work or a busy week at work, I'll go for a bike ride as soon as I'm done work and it clears my head. And sometimes if I have a busy week at work, I mentioned how I love traveling. Sure, I can't get on a plane every Friday and zip out of here. And for that matter, these days, I can't really get on a plane anyway because of COVID. But for me, even changing the scenery. So if I go to Canmore for a night, I find taking yourself out of changing the scenery and getting fresh air, that's how I de-stress. And as well, if it comes from people not understanding disability or being bullied, the thing that de-stresses me around that is knowing that I need to work harder to change that mindset. So even if I'm not changing that person, if I advocate somewhere, I know that I'm fighting back, and that takes away the stress as well.
All right, two more questions. The first one, do you have some advice for children starting out their ability journey?
I do, and my advice is to try everything. You don't know what you can do until you try and see you can do it. As I say, there are limitations, and I'm not blind to that. I'm probably never gonna become an Olympic speed skater, but that doesn't mean that you can't skate. So I encourage any child or parents for that matter to expose children to a wide range of activities and people. And they will find the one that they feel most comfortable at. And maybe even something they can improve at. Because you're a lot more likely to enjoy something if you can improve at it. If you go try to skip rope and you can't improve, you're not going to enjoy it. But if you hop on a bicycle and can go from here to the end of the street today, and then next week you can go another block, you're a lot more likely to enjoy that and build on that ability. So just in summary, expose children to all activities and find the one that's the best fit for them.
Great, thank you. Another question. Matt, you're truly amazing. I'm so impressed with the abilities you have, and most of the people I know could not keep up with you in your activities. My question, how do you think we can educate children at a younger age about people who have different abilities? How do we build better awareness?
I think that starts in the schools. I'm actually speaking at the Calgary Board of Education conference in February. And I don't recall ever being taught about disability in school. Maybe things have changed, but talking to a bunch of teachers, including my sister, it's not really taught in schools. So I think to bring awareness to teachers, even if it's not something in their curriculum. They can bring up little stories of someone in the news who overcome challenges. And I think by doing that more frequently to children, whether it be schools or even if you're a parent, exposing them to different forms of ability makes them understand, because as I mentioned, we're often scared of different. And so if kids see something they haven't seen before, they're scared of it and bully people. But if we bring that ability into their lenses more often, then it becomes more normal to them, and it will make a healthier society for everyone.
Thank you, Matt. Maybe one last question. Do you think more people are needed to do what you do, talk about the experience with disability?
Of course I do. There's always room for more people. I mean, I cannot talk to everyone. Most of the day I'm forecasting weather. But it's not so much that we need more people. We need more exposure, because it's not just me speaking, it's me living. So if I encounter someone at the store who sees me, and that may be all the education that person needs. If that person sees me and sees I can bag my own groceries, then they may be more educated. So it's sure we need more talking and awareness through seminars, but I firmly believe that education that goes beyond that. Like I talked about at that winery, especially the one that was accommodating to me. They had never seen that before, but they were willing to accommodate me. And if someone else goes in now, they've already seen it and it won't come as surprise, and they won't even think twice about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. I think we're about at the end of our seminar for today. If there are more questions from the audience, please feel free to message Matt directly, and I'm sure he's happy to discuss any other questions that may have come up during his talk. Thank you again for attending the seminar today. And Matt, thank you so much for this inspirational talk and sharing your thoughts and knowledge about those very important subjects. For those of you who signed up for the trainee chat, please turn on your microphone and video, and we'll start shortly with that. And everyone else, I hope you have a great day and Happy New Year again. Thank you, Matt.